parliament. Well, maybe they don't exactly have a parliament. And then the lower house and the House of Representatives and so on, and the matter gets thrashed there. But the president just forge ahead with the presidential order, and then, it becomes, effectively become law. It's a rule by decree. I think we are fooled by countries like America to say that, these are big democracies. Those people are not democracies. Even the declaration of war, the Vietnam War was illegal because it was never sanctioned by Congress, but it went there, people died and so on. And then, there's money sent to Palestine, money sent to Ukraine. They're all under the presidential minute. And meanwhile, there are about 120,000 people homeless in New York, which is scandalous. You see all the glittering faces of America and so on, but in those glittering cities, there are 120,000 unemployed people sleeping in the street and so on.
Okay. Look,
that's all. Yeah.
Chaka, the reality is that, when Trump is inaugurated, we're going to hear about how his inauguration is even a reflection of the democracy of the U.S. and the fact that it has been able to stand the test of time, right? That, in fact, it is democracy that has won through his re-election because the people have voted him back into office. There are always two sides to a coin, aren't they? Chaka out in Bloom. It's time for your latest news update.
In our top stories, South Africa aims to position itself as an attractive investment destination, and SAFTU blames government for deaths of illegal miners. Good morning. South Africa goes to the 2025 World Economic Forum as president of the G20, with the aim to position the country as an attractive investment destination. Leaders from government, civil society and business will gather in Davos, Switzerland this week for the 2025 World Economic Forum. President Cyril Ramaphosa will lead the South African delegation for the first time in many years. First Rand CEO Mary Vilakazi forms part of the delegation and says the country is on a firm footing.
Investors say to us they are encouraged about our democracy, progression, encouraged about what the government has announced around the country. But for them, they've been bitten a few times because South Africa has previously not executed. So the sentiment has generally been that investments will flow into South Africa once they see more concrete delivery on the action plans that have been articulated. So what is really very good about the session that we've just had is that I think there are clear markers that we can communicate back.
KwaZulu-Natal MEC for Economic Development, Tourism and Environmental Affairs, Reverend Musa Zondi, has disputed the recent reports that Itala Bank is insolvent. This follows the Reserve Bank's Prudential Authority's announcement last week that it had approached the High Court in Pietermaritzburg to seek an order to liquidate the bank. Zondi says Itala's financial position remains sound. He has assured clients that their funds are safe.
This is not a matter of insolvency. Itala remains a solvent institution with assets exceeding its liabilities. What we are dealing with here is a licensing and operational challenge, and we are committed to ensuring fair and equitable processes to resolve it. We understand the distress this situation causes, especially for families needing funds. I want you to know that the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal has escalated this matter to the highest office in the land, that of the President of the Republic of South Africa, in order to find urgent solutions.
A 31-year-old man has been arrested for allegedly setting alight a police vehicle in Thulamahashe in Mpumalanga on Saturday, outside the premises of the police station. According to reports, police officers were returning from a routine patrol and had parked outside the police station. Provincial Police spokesperson Jabundubane says police officers heard noises and found the police bakkie on fire. She says the suspect ran away from the vehicle but was caught and arrested. SAFTU's General Secretary Zulinzima Vavi has described the handling of the Stilfontein illegal miners matter as a monumental disaster. To date, 87 bodies of illegal miners have been retrieved and over 1,900 illegal miners have been brought to the surface. Vavi says if government acted faster, they could have saved more lives.
We went to Stilfontein at a time when most of the illegal mine workers were now being forced to leave because they have been starved of food and water as a result of that operation. More than 80 people have died. We think that had government moved with the necessary speed in the shaft where people were unable to on their own come out, it would have saved all of the people that have died.
And finally, the army in Ghana says 7 illegal miners have been killed during a shootout with soldiers in the Ashanti region. The deaths led to protests in Abuasi town, where several buses were set on fire. There's been a major increase in cases of illegal mining across Ghana, which is said to be fueled by the worst economic crisis in a generation. The BBC's Will Ross reports.
According to Ghana's military, around 60 armed men breached a security fence at a mine run by the company Anglo Gold Ashanti. In a statement, it said when soldiers had tried to stop the men, they were fired upon. The soldiers responded with live ammunition. In September, another mining company in the same region said it had repeatedly been raided by armed gangs. With the economic crisis, there's also been a major boom in small-scale gold mining across Ghana. Some of it's licensed, but many of the sites are illegal. The environmental impact has been devastating, and the government has been criticised for failing to take action.
Recapping the top stories, South Africa goes to the 2025 World Economic Forum as president of the G20 with the aim to position the country as an attractive investment destination. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
The National Pulse, weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Is it fair to say that maybe Ramaphosa has gone silent at this point in time because he has so many domestic fires to put out in this rather unusual coalition called the Government of National Unity?
I think Ramaphosa and the ANC will regain some of their supporters and popularity if they dealt with the Zimbabwe problem, if they dealt with the political issue in Zimbabwe. If you look at what's happening in Mozambique now, Mozambicans are not cowardly like us Zimbabweans, so they've gone out to the streets. 250 people have died already fighting against the rigging of elections.
Hopewell Chinono, award-winning journalist.
This is the National Pulse on SAFM. All podcasts can be downloaded on safm.co.za.
Every person, no matter who you are, what music you're inclined to listen to, and what you do with your weekends. You need a weekend playlist. It's that musical mix of music that accompanies the lazy weekends, whether catching up with friends and family or just taking some time to reflect. Tune in to The Soundtrack of Your Life with me, Ernest Pillay, Saturdays and Sundays, 1 to 4 on SAFM.
The Market Update, Monday to Thursday, 6 to 7 p.m.
Want to stay ahead of the financial game? Join us tonight from 6 to 7 p.m. for an insightful journey through the day's market developments, financial updates, and investment news. Tune in for your daily dose of financial intelligence as we navigate the twists and turns of the financial landscape with expert insights. Only on the SAFM Market Update.
SAFM Market Update with Jimmy Muyaha.
The Queens of South Africa's beautiful game are taking a break from their pitch duties to dress up and walk on the purple carpet. It's a special evening to celebrate players, coaches, administrators, and officials for their incredible devotion to the game. This is the Hollywoodbet Super League Awards 2024. From grassroots to glory. Witness the Hollywoodbet Super League Awards on Sunday, 26 January at 7:30 p.m. live on SABC1 and SABC radio stations. Also available at your fingertips on SABC Plus. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
You're listening to The Talking Point, 10 after 10 o'clock. Welcome to the second hour of the show. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be paying a closer look at sexual harassment, understanding what sexual harassment is, and all of it in light of the Judicial Conduct Tribunal's hearings into the case against Judge President Selby Mbenenge, who has been accused of sexually harassing a secretary in his office. So we'll get into that conversation shortly. Before we do, let's play some of your WhatsApp voice notes from the open line.
Cathy, good morning. I don't think the Judge President is unaware of sexual harassment and, what it means. Because he is the Judge President and that power that he wields, he thinks that it's okay for him and nobody can, do anything to him. He's untouchable. So who would, want to complain about him? They can easily lose their job. So that is what they have in mind. So that power dynamic, it's a terrible thing. So the main thing is the fact that these messages were sent to the secretary. That in itself is unacceptable. Teresa, Cape Town.
Hello, Cathy. It's Vuya here in Matasane. Cathy, I want to know if the government led by ANC is going to allow the use of taxpayers' money to pay flight tickets and catering for MPs and premiers and whoever to the opening of the parliament. And these people are working, Cathy. They are getting a lot of money, salary per month. Yet that money can be redirected to hire children to be inspectors, immigration officers. There are a lot of working opportunities that they can open with the money that they are playing with, that they are using to pay for people who are working, Cathy. They are working, those people.
Hey, this is Cathy and all SAFM listeners. Good morning. Well, speaking of the conundrum that the ANC finds itself on, I really believe that they will be making a fatal mistake if they are to dissolve those provincial structures of both provinces, KZN and Gauteng. That will actually lead into the ANC going down, further down in the next coming elections. This is Andile from Stakespruit in the Eastern Cape near Lesotho borders.
Good morning, Bishop Makwana from Leboa Zone F. Look, Cathy, in the best interest of the ANC as the leader of society, the ANC in Gauteng must be disbanded. The rivalry between National and Gauteng is going to cost ANC deal. So it must be disbanded. Bring in an interim premier, then start a fresh conference so that they could elect a new leadership. That's where the ANC will be clean. That's where the ANC will cleanse itself, because it is criminals who are holding on to this.
SAFM, leading the conversation.
All right, we get into our conversation for this hour, looking at sexual harassment. Just this past week, the Judicial Conduct Tribunal has been conducting hearings into the sexual harassment case against Judge President Selby Mbenenge, and it has really brought the issue of sexual harassment sharply into public focus. Now, some of the details that have emerged from those hearings are explicit, crude, and in some instances really downright shameful. Now, although we've come a long way as a society in terms of dealing with matters of sexual harassment, it is very clear that there is still a lot that needs to be done, including beginning just with the basics of what is and what constitutes sexual harassment. One just has to look, right, at some of the comments that people are making, whether it's on multiple social media platforms, whether it's on the live stream of these hearings, to see that clearly we don't have a deep understanding of what constitutes sexual harassment. To join us for this conversation, let me welcome onto the show Dr. Sheena Swimmer, who is the head of Gender Justice Program at the Center for Applied Legal Studies at Wits University. Dr. Sheena, good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Jean Bodestein is co-founder of the TUSA Consulting and Gender-Based Violence Expert. Jean, good morning.
Good morning, thanks for having me.
Sikangele Mabulu is coordinator of the Western Cape Wellness Center at Sonke Gender Justice. Sikangele, good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to all viewers. Thank you.
Well, let me thank you all for being part of this conversation. To kick us off, I want to play this clip, and it's made up of voices of individuals who have been victims of sexual harassment, and they describe some of their experiences, they describe what they've gone through. And this is not only in the workplace, but also in the streets and public areas, because sexual harassment really can be found in different facets of our lives.
I complained about aggression. Now this person is being friendly. Now I'm complaining again. What do I want? I knew my word was not taken seriously and the conditions I was working under. I had no logical reason to think I would be believed, I would be respected, I would be taken seriously. I existed in a state of fight or flight. Every time I went to work, I complained incessantly until it got to a point where I absolutely gave up because nothing was being done by the head of the organization.
He gave me a lift and then told me he loves me. He said he was scared to tell me. Then he asked me to have sex with him.
He harasses me, criticizing me as an English teacher.
Man, you don't know how to teach English. You don't know Sehuwa.
So basically, he walked by me in his office, and he grabbed me around the waist and had his hand right underneath my breast.
But this one particular person would take me out on different assignments, even though I wasn't in his department. And he started reaching over to me and like caressing my hair and telling me how beautiful I was.
And all of those, of course, detail different examples of women that have experienced sexual harassment. Dr. Sheena, I suppose just listening to that, one quickly realizes there isn't one way in which sexual harassment plays itself out or manifests itself, but certainly it seems to leave those who are victims of sexual harassment feeling almost the same way.
Yeah, so I think what we see, and I'm sure Jean will speak to it later, is that our law acknowledges various forms of sexual harassment, and it does so because, not only because it's a problem and it's violence, but because the different forms also culminate in very similar types of trauma, in very similar types of violations of rights. So from those clips we've played, we get things from verbal, physical, you even get implied sexual intimidation, but really the culmination or the consequence of this is very similar, as you say, whether it is physical or sexually being violated, like rape, or constant, suggestive sexual content, or sharing. A lot of these things are replicated in how they affect people.
Thanks for that, Sheena. I'm not sure if it's your line that we are having an issue with, but I'll certainly get the producers to follow up and see what's happening there. Jane, let me come to you. Part of where we also wanted to take this conversation is to be starting with the basics of what constitutes sexual harassment. And largely, I know personally, looking at some of the details coming out of the trial and reading people's comments and what people have had to say about the exchanges, the interactions, one very much gets the sense that on a very basic level, we're not clear about what sexual harassment is, and what kind of behavior constitutes sexual harassment.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for that great question. So the most comprehensive definition that we have of sexual harassment is in the Code of Good Practice on the Prevention and Elimination of Harassment in the Workplace. This is a fairly new code. It was signed in March 2022, and this is applicable on workplaces. So this is also a code that is put together because that the Employment Equity Act prohibits harassment in all forms, and the code aims to give an explanation of what that is. And sexual harassment is unwanted conduct of a sexual nature that can include physical, verbal, and non-verbal conduct. And I think that's especially important to remember from the voice notes that we've heard, whether expressed directly or indirectly, right? So, and it being unwanted doesn't necessarily mean that the complainant had to have said, I don't want this, right? It could also be unwanted if the harasser should have known that this conduct would be unwanted, right? And the previous engagement between the parties participation in sexual conduct doesn't mean that the conduct continues to be accepted. And then the code continues to mention types of sexual harassment. So it can be physical conduct, it can be following, watching, or pursuing an employee, sexual attention, advances and proposals, whether explicit or implicit, so suggestions, messages, tension or proposals of a sexual nature, and then obviously the implied or expressed threats of reprisal, so that something bad would happen, or actual reprisal, verbal conduct like innuendos, suggestions, hints, comments with the sexual overtones, and non-verbal conduct. So, for instance, indecent exposure, or sending electronic messages that would otherwise be of sexual explicit nature. So the how we see sexual harassment, I think, is definitely something we have to consider as a society, and also remember that although this code is limited to workplaces, and the judiciary does pose a kind of different setup, because the judiciary has its own code of sexual harassment, and courts are also places where people who are employed by a number of government stakeholders work together. So they don't all have the same employer. But that harassment in society is something that is recognized to such an extent that a complainant can apply to a civil court for a protection from harassment order, which is something we often forget. We only think about domestic violence orders, which are limited to domestic relationships. But people who interact with one another in communities, in societies, in different spaces, the law recognizes that harassment can take place in such spaces and provides for the opportunity to apply for such protection orders. So I totally agree with you. I've read the comments on the YouTube live stream, and it's very clear that as a country we struggle to understand the nature of sexual harassment and specifically the power dynamics. As part of the code that I've referred to, there's also mention of aggravating factors like difference in age between the complainant and the accused perpetrator, and the difference in rank, in seniority. So I think that's definitely something that is highlighted in this tribunal.
Sikangele, why is it that you think we do take such different approaches when it comes to sexual harassment as a society? I mean, Jean has outlined sort of what happens in the workplace, the code of conduct that sort of governs that, and what happens outside of that formalized, more informal space. And again, yet, if you're walking down the street, you walk past a group of, for example, men that are sitting there, they whistle, they make all sorts of comments about you, about your body. We don't automatically think, I'm going to report this is sexual harassment. And I wonder how much of that seeps into our ideas about what we think should or shouldn't be allowed within a workplace scenario.
Thank you very much for outlining some of the things that are happening outside and inside of the workplace. For me, I think the most important thing that we should look at is that when you develop a guide or you develop a statute, you must make sure that these statutes or this guide is accessible to the community. People get educated, knowing exactly why we developed this statute. In fact, indeed, people are supposed to participate when these statutes are developed. So we start to see those loopholes when we start to implement, and when people are resisting, because sometimes we engage almost every time to people. Indeed, we are not actually meet all of the committee people, but to show that when we meet the gatekeepers, we believe that this will take the information across the board. However, it's not easy to take the info there across the board, as we know that we've got a lot of people in the ground. So I must say that the issue of the sexual harassment, if people will actually remember, the sexual harassment issue was the normal language to people. Like to say to people that meaning to say that even if you don't have cows, but you can still eat meat. When the women pass in the street, you say that, and people will laugh and inflate and make it as it's fun. It happens before. You know, people were talking about those things. If a woman go past and people engage as if it's a normal thing. So that's a culture, that's a culture which is not acceptable, which South Africa and people of South Africa recognize that this thing is also perpetrating the gender-based violence. In fact, it's a gender-based violence itself. So we need to make sure that we eliminate or get rid of it. So this is the culture that was there before we introduced the guide of the sexual harassment. So in those ways, I invite the public, in fact, the gatekeepers, to make sure that they actually take the information to the people so that people know that if such things are happening, what should you do? Who supposed to report it to? And also monitor the police station. Because remember, these people that are in the police station, police, they also have the perpetual references. They've been, they are part of the community as well.
Okay.
They believe, they believe.
All right. We're going to continue the conversation in a moment. For now, it's 10:30. Time for your latest news headlines.
Good morning. In the headlines, police in the northwest are on a manhunt for an alleged illegal mining kingpin who escaped police custody after resurfacing from Shaft 11 in Stilfontein last week. A man arrested in connection with the rape of 2 nurses at Gatshwene Clinic near Liboa-Gomo in Limpopo has made a brief appearance in the Polokwane Magistrates Court. The accused had his case postponed to April this year for further investigations. And Donald Trump has told his supporters he will sign a series of executive orders on his first day as U.S. president that will target illegal immigration, slash environmental regulations, and eliminate diversity policies from the military. I'll have details on these and other stories at 11.
Taking a look at your markets this morning, the rand is currently trading at 18 rand 67 to the dollar, 22 rand 80 to the pound, and 19 rand 26 to the euro. Markets in Asia extended gains at the closing bell, the JC mainly higher in mid-morning trade. Markets in Europe are slightly firmer. Gold is trading at $2,705, platinum $937 per ounce. The price of Brent crude oil is at $80.53 a barrel.
Outsurance has another random fact for you. In 1998, a kid's 20 rand pocket money meant a shopping spree at the school tuck shop. Now, they need about 70 rand. The cost of living has gone up, but Outsurance is still committed to giving you big savings on your car insurance. SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754 to switch and save today. Let's hear what real Outsurance clients have to say.
When you deal with Outsurance, it is effortless. They treated us like human beings.
With Outsurance, you always get something out. Outsurance has paid out more than 6 billion rand in out bonuses. That's more than any other insurer.
With Outsurance, when you look at it, it sounds too good to be true, but it's good. It's true.
SMS out to 30754. That's out to 30754. With Outsurance, you always get something out. A licensed insurer and FSP. T's and C's online.
The SAFM Playwriting Competition is closing on the 3rd of February 2025. Explore the theatre of the mind and write your 60-minute radio drama play and email it before 5 p.m. on the 3rd of February 2025. Late submissions will not be accepted. For further information about the competition, visit safm.co.za or send an email to drama@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
We continue the conversation on the talking point. We're focusing on sexual harassment and in particular trying to understand fully what constitutes sexual harassment, and all of it really through the lens of a case that we've all been watching as a country at the Judicial Conduct Tribunal, and it's a sexual harassment case against Judge President Selby Mbenenge. Dr. Sheena Swimmer is our guest this morning, head of the Gender Justice Program at the Center for Applied Legal Studies, Wits University. Jean Bodestein is co-founder of the TUSA Consulting and Gender-Based Violence Expert. expert, and Sikangele Mabulu is a coordinator of the Western Cape Wellness Center at Sonke Gender Justice. Sheena, if I can come back to you, Sikangele gives an example of the ways in which harassment in our society often plays itself out, and it's a joke, everybody laughs, everybody moves on, and this is really behavior that women shouldn't frown upon. In fact, you should be grateful, right? Because it shows that you're desirable, it shows that you are wanted, quote unquote. And yet when these kind of behaviors play themselves out in formalized environments where there are different dynamics at play, including power dynamics, it of course changes the landscape altogether, right? And I wonder how much of it plays a role in sometimes making victims believe that they're making a big deal out of something that is small.
Yeah. So what I would say is sexual harassment, and as has been said, that it is in informal settings as well as formal settings. But the prevalence makes it something that individuals assume is something small. So a lot of times individuals may say that they didn't even realize that they had been sexually harassed. And especially when I speak to clients, they'll often say, I didn't know that it was called sexual harassment, but it felt wrong. And that's the type of thing that individuals do a lot, is because we're so accustomed to this kind of treatment or discrimination. And then also, on the other hand, is that individuals may say that this isn't a big deal because of the processes that need to unfold in dealing with these types of things. So you may be dissuaded by HR to lodge a complaint because it's a process. So, it's a culmination of so many factors, both from the victim, where they this type of thing is normalized, but they know something is wrong inside of them, but then also the systems that we have in place to deal with sexual harassment complaints. I mean, I sit as a proctor for UCT on their sexual harassment cases, and it does fantastic work at the tribunal, but even the time it takes for the sexual harassment cases to get through the system, I mean, I'm busy on one that has now taken 3 years. So, there's all these culmination of factors that an individual must now go through as well to have this feeling that something's wrong really validated. It makes it a very difficult situation.
This issue of what happens when one raises complaints around sexual harassment, I think, is absolutely still something that we need to have as part of this conversation. But Jean, perhaps you also want to speak to the issue of the power dynamic at play, and how, again, often victims of sexual harassment are afraid to say anything because, well, they don't want to be the ones that are seen to be blowing a matter out of proportion or, taking things too far.
Yeah, so I think the power dynamics and the reporting, right? So what Sheena touched on is so important. And at Tusa Consulting, my partner and I really tried to make sure that the clients, the organizations that we work with, have reporting mechanisms and protocols and policies that limit the amount of secondary trauma that survivors have to go through. So that's often the first step, is to ensure that, for instance, when an investigation has to be done or when a disciplinary hearing has to be conducted, that process is designed to deal with specifically sexual harassment and the power dynamics in sexual harassment. And when we chair disciplinary hearings or inquiries, we always have to ensure that there is procedural fairness so that all the parties involved had an opportunity to state their case, but also substantive fairness so that that the facts of the matter are taken into account objectively and truly. But procedural and substantive fairness can be achieved through many different ways. It doesn't have to be necessarily in a room altogether where the complainant has to recount the story in the same setting as the accused employee. So to make sure that everyone involved is treated with fairness, the sexual harassment policy and protocol has to be designed in a way that specifically caters for the different power dynamics, the trauma suffered by the complainant, and to make sure that when something like sexual harassment is reported, everyone, the complainant, the accused employee, the organizational leadership knows what is expected of them, what is the next step in the process, that the complainant knows what they can expect of the process, what they will have to, what the process is that they will have to go through, and so that they can make a decision about whether they want to report this or not. So I think it's really important that everyone involved knows exactly what is going to happen and the manner in which it is going to happen. Because that means it provides much more certainty for the complainant, so that when they complain, they know what they are signing up for, because that is a decision. And as with other forms of sexual violence, whether it is rape or sexual assault, survivors constantly have to make decisions about how they engage with the criminal justice system. And sexual harassment, in that sense, isn't that much different, right? The complainant has to decide. The accused employee has to know how they, what is expected of them. And very particularly, the leadership of the organization has to know what is expected of them, as well as the legal obligation that the Employment Equity Act puts on employers to eliminate and eradicate all forms of harassment in their organizations.
This question of consensual behavior in the context of sexual harassment, Sheena, it's a question that I think even this particular tribunal is going to have to deal with. And again, when we look at, let's say, the WhatsApp messages that were exchanged between the judge and the secretary in his office, some people look at that and they say, well, there were instances where they feel, but she's not really outright saying no, or that there was an expectation of a particular kind of behavior. And so how do we draw the parameters, right? Because what we know is that people have relationships in workplaces. What then is considered just flirting? What is consensual? What isn't consensual?
So with regards to the consensual and not consensual, and with this specific tribunal case as an example, what I think is important is that you are dealing with someone that has significant power. This is more significant than most of us will ever have, insofar as this is also someone in a leading position in the judiciary. So not only do we have that this is someone that is your boss, this is someone that is symbolically holding power within the country. So with regards to that, often the lines of consent, and I'm not going to say the lines of consent become murky. I would say that the power dynamics are very explicit here, and that people in positions of power should err on the side of getting express consent from individuals, whilst also acknowledging that they are in a position of power. So when an individual is approached by their boss or whatever, and they may fear that they may lose their job if they do not go along with the sexual advances, that becomes a very difficult place for it to be true consent. And I do think that people are being intentionally vague around saying, oh no, she sent these messages, so he was confused about the consent. I do think someone in the judiciary who knows all these acts, even the acts that Jean has spoken to, is very well aware of the power imbalances. You live this life of being high up in the judiciary. You're very aware of your symbolic as well as power's position in society. I think here more than anyone, you have an obligation to be aware that you shouldn't be having these types of, I wouldn't say relationship because it's not a relationship, this is violence, but you have a very high position and you have power to use against other people. So I actually think here there is a positive obligation on these individuals to really look at their behavior and see whether individuals can consent to them when there is such a difference in the hierarchies of power.
Sikangele, maybe let me give you a chance to come in here and again speak to number one, the issue of power, the power relations, right? We're going to play some voice notes shortly, and some of those that, we played earlier already indicated, women who feel, well, actually, if I'm getting these advances from people in my office, even I had to be educated to be made to understand that, this is harassment, and what I can do, what the steps then I can take to ensure that it comes to an end, what those steps are. So does the argument really hold where one says, no, I didn't stop making advances because she didn't tell me to stop? Is that ever a legitimate reason?
Are you saying that you're going to play the
No, I'm going to play them after you, Sikangela. I'm giving you a chance to respond.
Okay, thanks so much. Okay, indeed, the power is playing a vital role when it's come to sexual harassment. You look at the workplace. If we call it local type of sexual harassment, whereby people will be getting, to extend that you get a promotion due to the fact that you sexual harassed. In fact, you sexual harassed in a way you agree that you can do whatever you can do due to the fact that you want to get a promotion at work. These incidents are happening, even though in the workplace, because of each and every workplace should have a policy of sexual harassment due to the importance of it. But the policy, we see that most workplaces are not effective because of there is no system of this policy. The system means that you have a policy, and then after the policy, you have a committee that will deal with sexual harassment in the workplace. Like the employees will group together to form a committee where the committee is going to report that, except the human resource management, the managers, but the committee itself, so that the people can feel free to report probably the incidents, or the committee itself have talks to the rest of the group to say this is how, sort of like an independent committee in the workplace, but also having what you call it, a survey, like you monitor what you're doing, a certain period. After you have, you have to make sure that you do a research whether what you are doing is working effectively. Based on that research, because you'll get exactly what people are thinking, about the actions of the organizations, and then implement. In most of the cases, people are not even consider those things because they are not doing it for the sake of achieving something, but are doing of make sure that you, as an organization, you have this type of the policies. So these are things that are happening, and most of the departments, people were complaining to say, going like the government institutions, even if are not exposed, but people will talk. Some of the government institutions leaders were exposed on the sexual harassment, but sometimes people are not even exposed on those things. So these are the things, because if you evaluate what you've been done, it means that you grow from it. I've did this, but there's a lot of gaps that are supposed to fit in when you do those surveys. But let me just say that to the people that it's a struggling. Sexual harassment issue is a struggling because it's an entry of a small thing. That to say to people, I like your eyes are beautiful. You parking very well. Issues of hugging when you enter to work and people are hugging to each other, greeting to each other. It starts there, and when it happens, you don't figure it out, and you figure it out in between that time. My boss was greeting me. I didn't know this such thing is happening. When you enter there, then you have no way to go out. So that's why, as an employer, you always have check in on that one to say how people are, so that you also you want people to feel like supported, and also you want people to feel like if they're reporting on something, someone is going to take care of them.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that input there, Sikangele. I want to play firstly just this group of 3 voice notes, and then we'll give our guests an opportunity to respond. I'm also noting the questions that you sent through via the WhatsApp line that you're asking for clarity on. I'll put those questions rather to our guests too.
Good morning, Cathy, and to your guests. When it comes to sexual harassment in the workplace, I'm aware that it happens in both ways, either from a woman to a man or from a man to a woman. What is needed are detailed policies that are descriptive enough to explain what constitutes sexual harassment. It could be physical, it could be a verbal expression, it could be a facial expression as well, because it happens in many forms, so that we understand clearly what constitutes sexual harassment, what is considered appropriate or inappropriate behavior. Because what usually happens is it's the senior authorities who abuse their power because they hold high titles, and they cover up for each other when one lodges a grievance that is related to some sexual harassment. They cover and protect each other because it's not descriptive enough what constitutes sexual harassment. Thank you. It's Belinda from Mossel Bay.
Hi, Cathy. You're speaking to Sbo Ladla from KZN in Durban. Look, Cathy, I think I'm getting confused. The lady has read so many things that is I think it's in the law that defines sexual harassment, but she has read so many things, even if even when she says it may not have been known to the victim, but it must be known to the perpetrator. But how do you know it? And because in Zulu we used to say "Tuhlu siboni ntombazane" in the river, and then that's a sign of loving someone. But if you say you love somebody, it's a sexual harassment. If you say something that is sexual harassment, the definition is not clear.
Good morning, Cathy, and your guests and your fellow listeners. Look, can we call a spade a spade? These people who are sexually harassing people, they are fully aware of what they are doing. They know very well that it is wrong. But because they are in position of power, they will keep on doing it. I had to call my cousin to come and threaten a guy who was harassing me at work. I had to do that. I had to take it to the street fight, you know. And in another company, I had to get in front of a guy's face and tell him that if you ever say that to me again, I'm going to call my cousins again and they're going to put you in a boot. I had to do that for him to stop, because when you report to HR doesn't do anything, you know, because people are protecting their jobs and their positions. So we are on our own, but can we call a spade a spade?
Sure. Thanks for those voice notes. Sheena, do you want to maybe respond?
Well, I think for the most part, your callers are correct in many ways. From the exertion of power, from the fact that HR very often doesn't do anything, and even contentiously so from the individual that sounds like they may be a man, is that he says that the definitions are not very clear. I think all of those are important points, and I do think around definitions of sexual harassment, these are things that workplaces should be engaging with their staff on. I actually thought of an interesting comparison is if you work in a factory or something and a machine is going to eat off your hand, you know, you get training around using it and things. Now, if we are going to be in working environments where we have to get along with other humans, maybe we need a bit of training on how to get along with other humans in terms of sexual harassment and things. So maybe we need to relook at the ways that we view sexual harassment as that it's part of the training that humans should have when they're going to encounter other humans. You know, we do these things for other types of heavy machinery and those types of things. So why aren't we doing these in workplaces? And then I definitely agree with the caller who said that, yes, I do think that it's very intentional sexual harassment and that individuals know what they're doing. I think it's a convenient excuse and you can rely on it because the law in many ways has many readings to it around whether you understood or not. But I do feel that's a convenience. I do think that individuals who commit sexual harassment are very aware of what they're doing, because just like rape, sexual harassment is the assertion of power. Why are you asserting power? So you're asserting power to get some kind of need met. You don't do that just because it seems irrational in that way. So I totally agree with all of the callers.
Jean, I've got a question here, and it says, it's a question from Anonymous who's asking whether or not it's still harassment if the lady ends up reciprocating the advances of the initiator.
Thanks for the question, and I think we did touch on kind of the power dynamics and whether something that is perceived as consent really is consent, especially if it is a kind of relationship where there are different power dynamics, where there is a difference in age, where there is a difference in status, where there is someone who is very financially dependent or otherwise dependent on someone else. And if the sexual advances starts out as something that is either initially expressed as unwanted by the complainant, or if it is something that the harasser should have known would be unwanted, right? So even if people don't say, I don't like this, right? If the person who does the conduct should have objectively felt, maybe this is not going to be reciprocated, or I'm not sure, or there is a difference in power, so it might be unwanted. So even if then at a later stage it looks like the complainant is now reciprocating, that doesn't mean that it cannot be sexual harassment. So it is something that we've discussed over the past hour. How something that is that might from the outside look like consent or look like reciprocation isn't necessarily consent or reciprocation in a certain power dynamic, in a certain history. I mean, if something happens over a long period of time and it slowly builds, and eventually it gets to a point where the complainant does something that looks like consent, it doesn't mean that it's not sexual harassment. And I agree with Sheena. I do think it sometimes sounds unclear, but I also agree that when people are in relation to other people in a different power situation, that it is necessary to recognize that, and that it is necessary to act accordingly, and to use that power very, very wisely and be very aware of that.
All right. We're going to have to leave it there for this morning. Unfortunately, we're completely out of time for the conversation. It's 11 o'clock.
In our top stories, police launch a manhunt for alleged Stilfontein kingpin who escaped from custody, and Donald Trump promises a number of executive orders on first day as president. Good morning. Police in the northwest are on a manhunt for an alleged illegal mining kingpin who escaped police custody after resurfacing from Shaft 11 in Stilfontein last week. Police say extensive investigation and tracing operations are underway to pinpoint those officials who aided the escape of the alleged kingpin, who is a Lesotho national. National Police spokesperson Brigadier Linda Mate says this is an embarrassment to the Valamgoti operation that has been running from December 2023.
His real name is James Neo Twayedi, and he is a Lesotho national. He is being fingered in several statements as one of the ringleaders who controlled operations underground. He's also being accused by some illegal miners for being responsible for the deaths that happened underground. He's also being fingered for the assault and torture that was alleged to have taken place according to videos in police possession. He's also alleged to have hoarded and kept food away from other illegal miners. We vow to ensure that those responsible for this escape from custody are brought to book and that Tiger is found.
A man arrested in connection with the rape of two nurses at Gachwene Clinic near Libuagomo in Limpopo has made a brief appearance in the Polokwane Magistrates Court. The accused had his case postponed to April this year for further investigations. Outside the court, nurses, community members and non-governmental organizations were holding placards and protesting. One of the protesters, Caroline Thelma, says the accused should not be granted bail.
We want this man not to be granted bail. In just one day, he will be going to more than 5 houses, raping and stealing properties. We as the community, we don't want him back. We live in fear, and this is not good for us and our children. We can't have such a person living amongst us.
Meanwhile, Limpopo Health MEC Diaketseng Mashego says they've launched investigations against the 3 security guards who were allegedly overpowered by the suspect who allegedly raped the 2 nurses. Mashego says they suspect foul play by the security guards. The guards allegedly said they were attacked by a group of men, but police investigations have revealed the suspect was alone. She says they will also improve security measures at the clinic before it is reopened.
We'll be checking on the issue of capacity, and also in our SLA we've got we've outlined things that we expect from the security company. So an investigation is going on, but also we are saying as the Department of Health, we have now already set up a panel so that to ensure that in future such incidents don't happen in our facilities. Our investigation will be checking in terms of that if they are complying with the SLA, and then if not, as I've said, we'll be taking steps against the company.
Police have arrested a 21-year-old man from Delft on the Cape Flats after he set his 3 pit bull dogs on officers who wanted to search his premises for illegal firearms. Police spokesperson Malcolm Pierce says the members of the anti-gang unit had to use rubber bullets to evade being attacked by the dogs. Pierce says a pistol with 9.45 caliber rounds of ammunition, 10 Mandrix tablets and tick was found in the suspect's possession. The man faces charges for inciting the dogs to attack the members, the unlawful possession of a firearm and ammunition, as well as the possession of drugs. He's due to appear in the Bellville Magistrates Court today. South Africa goes to the 2025 World Economic Forum as president of the G20 with the aim to position the country as an attractive investment destination. Leaders from government, civil society and business will gather in Davos, Switzerland this week for the 2025 World Economic Forum. President Cyril Ramaphosa will lead the South African delegation for the first time in many years. First Rand CEO Mary Valakazi forms part of the delegation and says the country is on a firmer footing.
Investors say to us they are encouraged about democracy, progression, encouraged about what the government has announced around the country. But for them, they've been bitten a few times because South Africa has previously not executed. So the sentiment has generally been that investments will flow into South Africa once they see more concrete delivery on the action plans that have been articulated. So what is really very good about the session that we've just had is that I think there are clear markers that we can communicate back.
And finally, Donald Trump has told his supporters he will sign a series of executive orders on his first day as U.S. president that will target illegal immigration, slash environmental regulations and eliminate diversity policies from the military. He was speaking at a rally on the eve of his second inauguration yesterday. Trump will today be sworn in as the U.S. president. The BBC's Nada Taufik has more.
Donald Trump spent the eve of his inauguration firing up his supporters at a victory rally in Washington. He boasted about his political comeback and told the arena that years of American decline were ending. A new day of American strength, prosperity, dignity, and pride was beginning, he said. He repeated several of his campaign pledges, and on the cusp of power once again, he promised a flurry of directives known as executive orders on day one to push through his agenda and undo President Biden's.
Recapping the top story, police in the northwest are on a manhunt for an alleged illegal mining kingpin who escaped police custody after resurfacing from Shaft 11 in Stilfontein last week. For SAFM News, I am Anne Musa.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
Cathy, you've talked about this before, and I think my answer to some of your questions was that because I'm in a male-dominated industry and there's just sexual harassment every day, I've decided that I'm going to be loud about it. Every time it happens, I'm going to be loud. So last week, someone said, compliments of the new season. Come here, let me feel your body. I was like, what are you saying? Come here, let me feel your body. Then I called other colleagues. And then I said, please wait here. I called other colleagues and I asked him to repeat what he just said. And he just laughed. He did not repeat what he said to me. And it also goes back to the point that people are aware when they're saying things that makes us feel uncomfortable. They just pretend not to know. Thanks, it's Bongi here.
Good morning, Cathy. This is Anonymous from Cape Town. I just want to ask, I hear people talk about gender-based violence. It looks like it's only happens to women, but there is also men that go through gender-based violence even at work. I mean, not gender-based violence. I'm talking about sexual harassment, sexual harassment. There's also men who go through this even at workplace and all that. Even if they report, they can't even report because they will be laughed at. You are a coward. You can't report a girl that comes to you. You have to show that you are a man. So they end up not reporting and they end up not doing anything about it. But let us look also that way, that it goes both sides. Thank you so much.
Morning, House Cathy. Consent. What is consent when it comes to sexual harassment? That we need to dissect.
Good morning, Sister Cathy. This is Mateo. Sister Cathy, I once greeted a lady at the shop, right? Hello, Sissy, how are you? Fine, and you're fine. Hey, you look so beautiful. So, what are you saying? I said, you look so beautiful. Why are you saying that to me? Do you know that it's a sexual harassment? And I couldn't understand what to say. So, you know, I say, okay, I'm sorry. But even I'm saying sorry, she keeps on saying that you sexually harassed me. You end up not knowing what is sexual harassment. Good morning. This is Matebo.
Good morning, Sis Cathy. You know, I am very much confused because what I want to know is how then should you approach a lady? Because the moment you approach and you are like sort of like you are praising her, then it is going to be said it's sexual harassment. So I'm just asking to your guest there, they should tell us how then should we approach a lady so that we know that this is not sexual harassment or this is sexual harassment. Because now it's becoming difficult for men now to propose. It is going to become difficult to propose. And even these ladies, they also take that to their advantage. If they feel like they want to persecute this man, then they will just do like that. So please tell your guest there to explain this to us so that we understand.
Cathy Mohlahlana on SAFM.
Yeah, absolutely one of those conversations that we can have on a continuous basis because there are so many different facets of it that come up. Did you hear that one voice note from Bongi about her colleague who asked her if she can feel her body? And my jaw was on the floor. Just the absolute audacity, right? The absolute nerve. And good for you, Bongi, good for you for dealing with it in the way that you did. Because you've got to call out that behavior as and when it happens. And I know it's not always easy. And of course, there will also be those that try to victimize you for standing up for yourself. But kudos to you to actually being able to do it. Our final conversation then this morning is going to be looking at institutions of higher learning and in particular what it is that students who are looking to enroll into institutions of higher learning for the year 2025 need to be looking out for to ensure that they're not enrolling with institutions that are bogus, or rather that do not have the necessary accreditations to supply or to be offering whatever courses that they may be advertising. Dr. Mimi Gondwe is the Deputy Minister for Higher Education. She joins us on the line. Dr. Gondwe, good morning to you.
Dumela, Cathy, and good morning to all your listeners on SAFM. Thank you so much for having me.
The issue of bogus colleges, unfortunately, is one that has bedeviled our higher education system for years now. And unfortunately, many a time, people have been unwittingly been part of these institutions because they've been told that they're accredited. They've been told that they have what it takes to be offering the courses that students end up enrolling for. And unfortunately, it comes out too late that sometimes these institutions, in fact, do not have the accreditations for some of the courses that they should be offering. Let's talk about the work that your department is doing. Number one, in educating the public about what it is we need to be on the lookout for.
So, Cathy, what we try to do as a department is we have these awareness campaigns that we run on an annual basis, sometimes 3 times a year. We had one last year in Braamfontein, and we had it together with the city of Johannesburg. And that was a concerted effort on our part and on the city's part to visit various colleges in Braamfontein and try and determine whether indeed they were registered with the department. Remember, Cathy, registration is our responsibility as the department. So we can either register a private college or a private institution of higher education. And when we register them and they're registered with the department, then they will appear on our register. So we keep 2 registers, a register for private colleges and then a register for private institutions of higher education. And this register can be found on our website, which is www.dhet.gov.za. If you also want to verify whether a college or a private institution of higher education is registered, you can also call our departmental call center, which is 0800 87 222 222. I also have a help desk in my private office that you can email. The email address is dmshelpdesk@dhet.gov.za. What we've done as well with the Department of Basic Education is that we've requested the Department of Education to insert our contact details and the details of our website on the certificate for matric learners, so that they are able to also check whether a college or a private institution of higher education is registered with us. We've also taken a number of steps as the department to regulate the private education space. The Constitution, specifically Section 29(3), guarantees private institutions of higher education to operate, and so they are permitted in terms of the Constitution and the Higher Education Act to operate, but within certain parameters. So we regulate the higher education space via legislation and the relevant regulations. We have the Higher Education Act, which was promulgated in 1997, and the Continuing Education and Training Act, which was promulgated in 2006. Coupled with the legislation, Cathy, we also have an administrative framework and standard operating procedures in relation to the registration of private colleges and private institutions of higher education, and we monitor and evaluate these institutions. So, for example, private institutions have to submit their audited financial statements, tax clearance certificates to the department on an annual basis in order to determine their financial viability. So we've done quite a number of things, but unfortunately, Cathy, even though we've taken these steps, you still find learners and parents, falling prey and falling foul to, bogus or illegal institutions. And, the sad thing is that, when you register with these institutions, you not only waste your time, your money and your resources, but you lose out on an opportunity to get a legitimate qualification and an employment opportunity. And it's quite sad, Cathy, because we have a high level of unemployment amongst young people. And so, they really take away a lot from learners and the parents alike. Parents who've, have invested their hard-earned money into the possibility of a child getting an education, they find that it's bogus or it's illegal. So it's really quite, how can I say, we do our best, but we also encourage parents and learners to do their bit of due diligence.
Sure.
And just take that go that extra mile to verify whether a college is legitimate. So you can ask 10 or more learners that you know are registered with that particular college or private institution of higher learning. Go on to Hello Peter. The only resource that you don't have to rely only on DHET website as the only resource, but there are other ways of just going that extra mile to ensure that the college or the private institution of higher education that you want to register with is legitimate.
Are there some areas that are more susceptible to the existence and the practice of these bogus colleges than others?
Yes, I must say, so let me give you an example. We targeted Braamfontein last year. We've got 2 directorates that deal with private institutions of higher education in the department, and these 2 directorates are the private higher education institutions directorate and the private colleges directorate. So how they identified that particular area was that I was speaking to one of the officials, and she was saying that these colleges target that particular area because you've got higher education institutions that within the vicinity. So you've got VITs there. And so what they do, they literally prey on young people who come from whichever part of the country. They descend on Braamfontein. Some even just take a chance and think, I'm going to try and register at WITS. And then they find that, they can't get a space there at WITS, for example. And then that's when, you have these private colleges or institutions of higher education. So, we've noticed that, your metropolitan areas, your areas where you have your higher education institutions, we've got 26 public universities. So in those areas where you find that we have a concentration of these universities, you'll find that some of these bogus or illegal institutions of higher education would be there, Cathy. And Cathy, allow me to also touch on how you can identify whether a college or a private institution of higher education is legal or illegal. So, for example, the telltale signs would be the quality of the infrastructure. Have a look at the infrastructure. Does it look presentable? Does it look like a legitimate college? Is the infrastructure in a good condition? Look at the level of professionalism on the part of the staff. Do the staff look professional? Do they know what they're doing? Those are the telltale signs. Look into the qualifications of the teaching staff. Go onto the website.
Sorry, Dr. Gondwe. Before you go on, just on the issue of infrastructure, right? I don't know to what extent can infrastructure be a good indicator, because the reality is that we have a lot of TVET colleges and institutions that are not in the best of shapes, and yet they are credible institutions. You also have institutions that would have received accreditations to offer certain courses, whether it's, with your CETAs or whichever other accreditation bodies. But they don't have the best infrastructure. It's not up to scratch. So there is a discrepancy there, no?
Not really, Cathy. So I want to talk a bit about the infrastructure. So it's also important to look at the quality of the teaching and learning at the particular college. So let me just go back to the infrastructure. So you look at things of, is there a library? Is there a computer lab? Are there conducive lecture rooms? I'm not taking away from the fact that some of our colleges may not be, our 50 TVET colleges may not be in the best of conditions. But, it's very important to look at the infrastructure, look at the quality of teaching and learning, look at whether there's a registration certificate, look at the accreditation details. So, even those TVETs where you find that, they're not in a good condition, but at least we know that that is a legitimate TVET. But those are some of the telltale signs, Cathy. and look at the terms and conditions of the agreement that the college wishes you to enter into, the enrollment agreement. Does it allow for the refund of the registration fee? Find out whether there's an assessment policy, because we found that with some of these colleges that are not legitimate, your bogus and illegal ones, there's no regular assessments and the like. So even with our TVETs that are not in a good condition, we know that there are regular assessments taking place.
There is a responsibility on the Department of Higher Education to also be ensuring that these institutions, number one, where they're making claims that are not valid, that they're able to actually deal with that. And that seems to be where some of the challenges have come from. If you look at what happened with EduCore last year, part of the confusion that really resulted in students sitting for a couple of months not knowing what else to do is because there wasn't this clarity from the department around the status of this institution and whether or not students could continue to enroll. But even then, there were difficulties in terms of assisting the students who were part of these institutions. And I just wonder, how far does the department see its own role and its own involvement with these institutions and with the students that sometimes do fall prey to them? And it's not always, the dodgy ones that you will find, like you're saying, sometimes in the middle of Braam. But you also would have institutions that have been credible for some time, but for whatever reason have not been able to keep up with their accreditations and lose it.
So, as a department, Cathy, we always, our first priority is always the welfare of the students. So even if, let me give an example what will typically happen when a learner or a parent calls the department's call center and reports a particular college. We'll then ask for evidence or information corroborating whatever they have to say about the college, corroborating the fact that the college is illegal or it's not legitimate. And then we'll do our own investigation and we'll establish whether, the college is not on our register. And then we'll issue the institution with a warning letter and give them an opportunity to comply. So even with those ones that start off as being legitimate, we do give them an opportunity to comply. And even those ones that we pick up on the fact that they might not be legitimate, we give them an opportunity to comply. And if they continue to operate with impunity, Cathy, then and continue to not comply, then we'll open a case with SAPS. And if needs be so, if we open a case with SAPS and, the situation is still continuing, then we'll approach the High Court for an interdict. We'll also put them on the list of bogus colleges or bogus institutions of higher learning, because we also have a list of bogus institutions and colleges of higher learning on our website. But we do try our best to assist Cathy. So we also try and assist with insofar as a refund. So when a student calls and says, I've been duped by an illegal or bogus college or institution for higher learning, we ask them to approach the small claims court for a refund. And then we ask them to also lodge, a complaint with the department, and then our own internal processes follow, where we now move to issue a warning letter and see whether the college complies or not. And if it doesn't comply, we put them on the register of bogus or illegal institutions of higher education. So I think we do give institutions and colleges an opportunity to comply. And if they fail, then we also proceed to open a case with SAPS.
Mac, you're calling us from Durban. Good morning.
Good morning, Cathy. Good morning to your guest as well. I have a question and also to refute a statement that the Deputy Minister made in terms of, you asked a question about infrastructure, where you said that some of our TVET, I come out of the sector, I was there for 18 long years. And number one, we have problems that when you look in terms of the infrastructure and whatever happened, Those people are not part and parcel and not doing credible. Some of them does not even have the accreditation, but because they are government institutions, therefore, they still being seen as people that are credible. How does she rectify that? How does she say to us, these are credible institutions? That's my question to her. Because you say to us as private providers that we do not know what we do. Thank you.
Yeah, Mac, it's an excellent question. Minister?
Cathy, I'm not sure I understood his question. Is he saying that all institutions, some of the institutions that are public, as in our 50 TVET colleges, some of them don't have quality infrastructure?
So Mac was building on the question that I raised earlier, and he says that where government institutions have infrastructure that doesn't comply, they are still given their accreditation. They still remain with their accreditation because they're government institutions. Whereas private providers who would be in the same situation would be shut down with similar infrastructure. They would be shut down for not being compliant. And he just wants you to explain why that is the case, because it really is a case of double standards, right? That on the one hand, you rightfully shut down a particular institution for not meeting the basic criteria,
yes.
Whereas on the other,
yes.
government's own institutions sometimes are the ones that fail to meet the criteria, but they continue to operate. I'll give you a chance to respond. I'm going to give you a chance to respond to it shortly. It is 11:30. It's time for the latest news headlines.
Thanks, Cathy. Good morning. I'm Cholani Tulo, making headlines. Police in the Northwest are on a manhunt for an alleged illegal mining kingpin who escaped police custody after resurfacing from Shaft 11 in Stilfontein last week. Police say extensive investigation and tracing operations are underway to pinpoint those officials who aided the escape of the alleged kingpin, who is a Lesotho national. A 40-year-old man is expected to apply for bail in the Frankfurt Magistrates Court in the Free State today in connection with the alleged rape of a 16-year-old boy in Frankfurt. Police say the victim alleges that on the 1st of January, he was given alcohol by the accused while visiting a friend. And finally, the advocate representing AmaZulu King, Misizulu Kazwelithini, has handed their papers in the Pietermaritzburg High Court to oppose an application for an interdict against him taking another wife. Queen Ntokozo Kamaisela Zulu is asking the court to halt the king's customary marriage to Nomzamo Myeni, which was to have taken place next Sunday. I will have details on these and other stories at 12 o'clock.
The SAFM Playwriting Competition is closing on the 3rd of February 2025. Explore the theatre of the mind and write your 60-minute radio drama play and email it before 5 p.m. on the 3rd of February 2025. Late submissions will not be accepted. For further information about the competition, visit safm.co.za or send an email to drama@safm.co.za. SAFM, leading the conversations that move us. The National Pulse, weekdays, 3 to 6 p.m.
Is it fair to say that maybe Ramaphosa has gone silent at this point in time because he has so many domestic fires to put out in this rather unusual coalition called the Government of National Unity?
I think Ramaphosa and the ANC will regain some of their supporters and popularity if they dealt with the Zimbabwe problem, if they dealt with the political issue in Zimbabwe. If you look at what's happening in Mozambique now, Mozambicans are not cowardly like us Zimbabweans, so they've gone out to the streets. 250 people have died already fighting against the rigging of elections.
Hopewell Chinono, award-winning journalist.
This is the National Pulse on SAFM. All podcasts can be downloaded on safm.co.za. Bridget Masinga on SAFM.
Let's look at perhaps the most common red flags that job seekers should be on the watch out for in order to avoid themselves falling victim to job scams.
First red flag I would advise people to look at is the upfront fees. In actual fact, anything that's related to you paying or there's a request for money. And we've seen so many people falling into scams of this, and this is one of the biggest scams that they use.
Lucas Molefe, who is a cybersecurity consultant with ESET Southern Africa.
The Full Circle with Bridget Masinga. All podcasts can be downloaded on safm.co.za.
The Talking Point with Cathy Mohlahlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We continue the conversation on the Talking Point. We're looking at the issue of bogus colleges, and in conversation with the Deputy Minister for Higher Education, Dr. Mimi Gondwe. I'll, of course, also continue to take your calls for her on this issue. Dr. Gondwe, let me give you a chance to go back to addressing the issue that Mac raised around the standards and the differences that we see applied in the public versus the private sector.
Okay, so I want to clarify something. Registration is our responsibility as the department. As I said earlier, we offer two types of registration, namely registration as a private college and registration as a private institution of higher education. Accreditation, on the other hand, is very much the responsibility of our quality assurance bodies, such as QCTO, Umalusi, and the Council on Higher Education. So your Council on Higher Education accredits higher certificates, diplomas, and degrees. Umalusi accredits college programs, and QCTO would accredit skills development programs together with CETAs. So if MAC knows of a TVET college, one of our 50 TVET colleges that is not in a good state, the infrastructure is bad, or there are issues around its registration and accreditation, please give us a call. We will look into it. So I want to clarify that registration is our responsibility as a department. Accreditation, on the other hand, is a responsibility of our quality assurance bodies.
Yeah, and again, perhaps to go into that finer detail, at what point does the department deregister public institutions when they're failing to meet the basic criteria that is set out for the industry as a whole?
Obviously, we have certain requirements that they're supposed to fill. So if we find that an institution is not fulfilling those requirements, Cathy, and we have investigated and we have looked into it, then we will definitely move to ensure that an institution is deregistered. But I want to emphasize that we do give institutions some time to comply, because we always put the interests of the students at the heart of any decision that we take.
Have you had public institutions that have been deregistered before?
I can't say, Cathy. No, not to my knowledge. I mean, I've been in the department for a couple of months now, but in the time that I've been there, we've never come across, a public institution that we've had to deregister.
Yeah, look, and I guess that perhaps also points then to part of the issue that Mac was raising. Bob, you're in King Williamstown. Good morning.
See, I know you're talking about bogus institutions today. However, I thought I'd call with regards to my issue last year regarding Intech College, where I cancelled my tuition on the 14th of April. That thing has still not gone away. I've been writing to them to no end. All I keep receiving is account statements. Now they're telling me I owe about 33,000, despite the fact that they cancelled early in April. So all my correspondence that I've been sending to them, they only acknowledge receipts thereof in December. And from December, they say the process is going to take 90 days. But I tell them that I've been waiting for a year already. So my question to the minister or the manager is, how are those institutions allowed to do this to us, where we pay deposits, and when you cancel, they seem to take forever to reimburse our deposits? And possibly what can I do to make sure that they actually give me my money back before the end of the year?
Okay, thanks for the question, Bob. Dr. Gondwe?
Bob can write to us. I've given him the details of the department's call center, as well as the details of my help desk and the department's website, where he can reach out to us and indicate what the issue is, and then we will look into it. As I mentioned, we've got 2 directorates that assist us in regulating the private higher education space, namely the Private Higher Education Institutions Directorate and the Private Colleges Directorate. And I know that at the moment we're trying to, strengthen our resources around, private institutions of higher education, including our directorates. So he can reach out to the department. Please, Bob, reach out to the department, reach out to my help desk, and we'll assist.
Okay. Thomas, you're in Newcastle. Good morning.
Good morning, Ms. Kate. Good morning, Ma. Maybe I will be like a broken record on this in that she's spoken. The Deputy Minister, she's not clear when you say, for instance, infrastructure as the measuring stick of the credibility of an institution. I mean, I can put good things, like I can put on a suit and pretend to be an educated person and rob you. So infrastructure shouldn't be the curriculum or the criteria for me as a layperson to be making out, is this a reputable or accredited institution or not? She needs to give me more. You ask her that question, she comes back and she says, and all those others. And she said nothing. She just spoke about infrastructure, that the place is presentable, but that cannot be what's the point I'm wanting to say? It cannot be a measure of a credibility of a thing for a layperson like myself, because we've been robbed by people who are putting flashy things in front. Meanwhile, the documentation doesn't count. So she needs to do better than what she's doing. She's not helping us as the lay people on the ground.
Look, Thomas, I take the point that you're making. In fact, you remind me of one institution, but this was a number of years ago. I can't remember the name. It was an institution that had set up in Sandton around the Melrose Arch area. And I remember doing that particular story as a journalist at the time. I'd received complaints from this group of students who were questioning the credibility of their courses. And lo and behold, and they were paying, quite a significant amount of money on a month-to-month basis, only for them to have discovered in that year that the courses that they had been enrolled for were in fact not accredited. And it speaks to the point that you're making, that you do in some instances get very unscrupulous individuals. And it's not to say everything that they're offering is not accredited, but they're very strategic about it. They accredit it for some, and then there seem to be some other courses that they just slip in there. It becomes a gray area, and people just make the assumption that this is a credible institution.
And the thing is this, because I'm told, if I might just put this, right now the question that was being asked on how do we as people who want education, because education is the key, how do we ascertain? Now what she's giving me, and I'm harping on the Deputy Minister because they are the ones who should protect us. If she says infrastructure, that doesn't help me, and I need more from her. The fact that she said it doesn't mean that it's true, and I can go today and go and use whatever information and say, the Deputy Minister said, this is how I will find out. Because it's immeasurable.
Dr. Gondwe?
She should be more responsible.
Let me give a chance to respond.
I think the gentleman didn't hear me quite well. I mentioned a number of telltale signs, including the quality of infrastructure. I said, look at the level of professionalism on the part of the staff. Look at the qualifications of the teaching staff. Look at the quality of the agreement that you are supposed to conclude. Does it allow for a refund, for instance? Look at whether there's an assessment policy in place. Look at whether the college is displaying a registration certificate and its accreditation details. These are supposed to be displayed on the premises. Look at the quality of teaching and learning. Does the college or the private institution of higher education, for example, have computer labs, a library, and proper and conducive lecture rooms? So there are a number of telltale signs. I've also encouraged learners and parents to do their bit of due diligence in relation to determine the legitimacy of a college or private institution of higher education. I've said speak to 10 or more learners that are enrolled at an institution. Visit Hello Peter to see whether, that particular college has been named or shamed. I've also touched on the fact that you can go onto our website. We keep a register of private colleges, another register of private institutions of higher education. You can call our call center. You can even email my help desk and we'll be able to assist. So I've given a number of ways in which you can determine the legitimacy of a private college or a private institution of higher education.
All right. Let me go to Chris. You're in Johannesburg. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, Chris?
Yes, thank you very much. I just want to ask comments on who is speaking on illegal institution, whereas they're actually the main big known institution in the country are also providing courses that are not accredited. Like my partner did a master's in town planning in University of Stellenbosch, and after she graduated, she realized that the course was not accredited. She's unable to get a job with that course, spending a lot of resource, doing that course. She had to take short courses on data analysis in order for her to be able to get a job. So I'm just adding that there are courses that main universities in the country that they're giving, and those courses are not accredited. And before she even did the course, she asked the professor if this course was accredited. They indicated that it was. Then after graduating, she found out that it wasn't. Can the minister advise how can which steps can she take, to
Chris, what I don't understand, was the entire master's not accredited?
Yes, it's not accredited. It's not the professional body for town planners do not recognize the masters that University of Stellenbosch was rendering.
And is it because of the choice of subject that she focused her master's on?
No, this is not. It's not because of the choice of subject. It's not yet accredited. We're speaking about accreditation.
Yeah.
In order for you to say that you are a professional town planner, you need to carry out this course, and that's what the university indicated. Told her that she did the course. Then we ended up finding out the course is not accredited.
Okay.
So it's not because of the course that she chose. This is a university that has the right infrastructure in place. You assume that when you go into UCT or you go into Stellenbosch or VET, you're not going to graduate and find out that the course that you're doing is not an accredited course.
Yeah. Okay. Dr. Gondwe?
So I just want to clarify that accreditation, we've got our quality assurance bodies that deal with accreditation. So we've got QCTU, Umalusi, and the Council on Higher Education. So the Council on Higher Education accredits higher certificates, diplomas, and degrees. So I would encourage the gentleman to send us an email as a department, and then we can always take it up with, the relevant accreditation body, which I think in this instance would be the Council on Higher Education, to get clarity on whether, that course is accredited or not. And then we can take things from there. The gentleman is saying it was not accredited. It sounds like it was not accredited, but, and then to also offer recourse on what can be done in that instance.
All right. Okay, Chris, please do get in touch. Maybe Dr. Gondwe, now's a good opportunity to give you just to remind our listeners of your contact details and the email address that they can use.
Okay. So, Cathy, before I do that, I just want to also encourage parents and learners alike that nothing stops a student or parent from reporting a bogus college or a bogus institution of higher learning to SAPS and helping us to shut it down. And then letting us know as a department that you have lodged a case against a particular college or a a private institution of higher education, and then our internal processes kick in. Because, Cathy, I need to also emphasize that the operations of some of these bogus colleges or institutions of higher learning are linked with other acts of criminality, such as money laundering and illegal immigration. And that's why with the next round of public awareness campaigns, we intend to go with other departments such as your Home Affairs and your Labor, not just the relevant municipality when we do the public awareness, because we've realized that the operations of these colleges are often coupled with other acts of criminality. So for parents and learners who want to verify whether a college or a private institution of higher education is registered with the department, please email, go onto our website rather, which is www.dhet.gov.za. You can also call our call center, the department's call center, and its number is 0800 87 2222. I also have a help desk in my private office, and the email address for that help desk is dmshelpdesk@dhet.gov.za. So those are the ways. And I want to remind parents and learners alike that we do keep a register on our website of bogus colleges or institutions of higher education, because once a college is not able to comply, or a private institution of higher education is not able to comply, we then put them on the list of bogus or illegal institutions of higher education.
Dr. Mimi Gondwe, we'll leave it there for this morning. She's the Deputy Minister for Higher Education. All right, that brings us to the end of the show for this Monday morning. Up next is the book reading. Of course, the talking point, back with you tomorrow between 9 and midday.
The book reading. Please note that the views expressed in this book are not that of the station. Listeners' discretion is advised. SFM presents another episode of the book These Things Really Do Happen to Me by Kaya Dlang, read by Lerato Mvelase.
The war for Sam's cell phone number. My romantic life had had a flair for the undramatic, and it has been rather uneventful in nature. I'm grateful for that. In 2001, when I began looking for some other form of employment besides being a waiter, I found out about an organization